Hello and welcome to the Gaggle Where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle. So, Peter, over the last few days, we've had the reverberations from an interview conducted by Tucker Carlson with the U.S. ambassador to Israel, which Mike Huckabee. And of course,
I would call it nuclear fallout, but anyway.
Exactly. And of course, the whole thing is very interesting. I mean, the background of how this took place, because evidently Tucker Carlson had come under pressure from the Trump White House that he needed to tone down his his fights over Israel, his anti-Israel positions, the whole battles over anti-Semitism and everything needed to come to an end. So it seems that he, with the help of a former Fox News host, Melissa Francis, set up this interview with Mike Huckabee. Now, then it became quite problematic because the he intended to have the interview, as you would expect, in the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem. However, um, he expected, quite reasonably, that he'd be provided with some security. And therefore, he asked the U.S. Embassy to provide him with some personnel to take him from the airport to the embassy. The U.S. Embassy said they weren't going to do that. Then, after it wasn't clear why the U.S. Embassy said they weren't going to do that. So he would have to go from the airport to the embassy himself. And given the fervor against Tucker Carlson in during the past few months, particularly whipped up by the likes of Mark Levin and
Mhm.
um, and others.
And
He,
remember, everyone, a sitting prime minister was assassinated in Israel.
yeah, exactly. That's a very good point. And so he then asked whether the Israeli ministry would provide him with security. They also said there'd be no security available. So at this stage, given the possible peril he might be under, he wondered whether the interview could be conducted at the airport. And so that was finally agreed upon in the VIP lounge at Ben Gurion Airport. Now, this was a very lengthy interview. It was something like 2.5 hours, and then afterwards, as he was leaving, he was, had to go through a very arduous process, a security process. I mean, he's leaving the country. It's not like he's entering the country, he's leaving the country. And the security people at the airport wanted to know what he was talking to the U.S. ambassador about, the
An
content of that
American to
conversation.
an American.
That's right, exactly. And they needed to learn all of that. And this went on for quite some time. Now, eventually he left. Then he sent out a tweet describing how he had been stopped and interrogated at the airport. And then Mike Huckabee then sent out a tweet saying, "Oh, no biggie. This happens. All the time. Really, it happens all the time. Somebody comes in, a prominent journalist, interviews the U.S. ambassador, and then he gets the third degree by
Well,
security at the
all the
airport.
blood.
That's all just a
Okay,
daily routine."
I've been through that myself. Okay, but the exit interview, where did you visit? Who did you see? Et cetera, et cetera. Well, Tucker Carlson, I guess technically didn't really enter the country. He was in the
He was
airport.
there. That's
So,
right.
and
And
they know exactly who he spoke to. He spoke to the U.S. ambassador. So, I mean, what's the mystery here?
exactly, they wanted to know what the conversation was about, which is a very different line of questioning. Also, then they released that photograph to show, oh, Tucker Carlson's lying because here's a picture of him with his arm around some Israeli airport official, and the Tucker Carlson said, "Well, this photograph was with me and the driver who drove us from the terminal to the VIP lounge, and he wanted to pose
Of course.
with this with them, and so they had their arm around each other, and but this took place before the interview and before the interrogation. Now, then, of course, there was a background which we've learned. So before we get to the interview, it's kind of interesting, what else had been going on in the previous weeks that led up to this interview, because clearly there is a campaign being waged against Tucker Carlson, and I think that he wanted to clear the air. I think I think we can safely say that this interview will not have cleared the air. That this is only going to worsen relations between the
Well,
Zionist lobby and Tucker
and,
Carlson.
and part of that background, and you and I both saw it, and I guess millions of other people too, during this last few months, the reason why Team Trump wanted to get these two gentlemen together to clear the air
Right.
is that Tucker came out with a very uh, full-throated condemnation of Christian Zionism.
Yeah.
And George, when Tucker had his program at Fox, the number of times you and I would say, "Do you think he's going to let him back into the studio?
Right. Right.
Did you
Right.
hear what he say?"
Right.
And that was one of those Tucker Carlson moments where it was full-throated condemnation. And I don't know. I agreed with it. I
Yeah.
think maybe you did.
That's
A
right.
lot of other people did,
That's right.
and so as we get closer to the interview, he wanted to apologize, and he
He did.
did.
He did, and he did apologize in that interview for what he had said about Christian Zionism to Huckabee. I think that's obviously an important part. But there is the the issue that Tucker Carlson had a very full-throated issued a very full-throated condemnation of the bombing of Iran. He was very strongly opposed to it, and of course there were other figures on the right who were also critical, but they've all kind of disappeared. I mean, well, obviously we have the case of Charlie Kirk. He's gone.
Yeah,
Um,
he's literally gone. Yeah,
Literally gone. Yes, like as in the Goodfellas. He's gone. And Marjorie Taylor Greene, she's now resigned from Congress, so she's on the outside. Bannon, who's kind of all over the place, he always just wants to keep in with Trump. Whatever Trump, wants, Bannon's always there to support it. So he's not absolutely someone you can't count on. So really, it's really Tucker Carlson that's left in on the right as a strong opponent, other than the sort of familiar libertarians,
yeah.
Rand Paul, his father Ron Paul, Thomas Massey. But they've always been around, and they're almost like part of the furniture. And then nobody they're not that influential.
Well, as a sidebar to this, MAGA is if maybe not embracing, but they're certainly accepting Trump's foreign
Yeah,
policy.
that's,
So
that, that,
I guess it
that,
was on these. I guess it was just skin deep, huh? Okay.
I agree. But anyway, so here, if you just if we follow the timeline, so here was now Melissa Francis, who really isn't terribly bright, but she obviously had very good relations with Tucker Carlson. So she set this up, and she was at the interview between Tucker and Huckabee. And so here's this article in the Times of Israel that it says Tucker Carlson and Huckabee had emotional interview in attempt to mend rift in GOP, says former Fox host who was present.
Well, emotional. That's not the word that comes to my mind. But go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Frances said that she had dinner with Carlson in Florida a few weeks ago, and she invited him to come along for a visit to Israel. He responded that US President Donald Trump had asked him to rein in the fight within the Republican Party over Israel. out of a concern that he was helping the Democratic Party. According to Francis, Carlson said that he had reached out to Prime Minister Netanyahu to arrange a meeting in Israel, but never received a response. And he does mention that during his introduction to the interview, he said, well, he wanted uh, to to talk to him. He knew Netanyahu wouldn't give him an interview, but he at least wanted to talk to him to clear the air.
Yeah,
But
privately,
privately, it
privately.
was a private conversation. Netanyahu wasn't going to talk to him. And then here, this is World Israel News. This is again Melissa Francis. On Wednesday, coinciding with Carlson's visit, former Fox News personality Melissa Francis told the Jerusalem Post that the upcoming interview was arranged as part of an effort by President Trump to rein in the growing rift. And and then here, she's gained prominence as an advocate for Israel following the October the 7th invasion. Um, and Trump, Francis continued, has pressed his supporters who have come out publicly against Israel, including Carlson, to tone down their rhetoric on the issue. President Trump is telling everyone, including Tucker, that let's take this down. Francis said the division of the Republican Party right now has to end. She continued, warning that the conservative infighting is causing endless problems. The enemy wins when those that are on the side of God are divided.
Oh God.
Um, and now you see, here we have this, and the Francis recalled a conversation with Carlson after the idea of recording a show in Israel was first floated. Carlson, she said, expressed interest in flying to Israel for the interview, but conditioned it on receiving a signal of support from Netanyahu. So I think obviously he was kind of concerned about his security, his personal safety, given all the talk. I mean, the whole thing, Carlson's a Nazi, Carlson's a Nazi, that's become quite ubiquitous. It's not
Yeah.
like, oh, no, that's just Levin. No, it's relentless
Er,
all the time.
Ergo, it's okay to kill Nazis.
Exactly. Ergo, it's okay to kill Nazis. I would go tomorrow, Carlson said, according to Francis. I need to know that the prime minister would welcome me. However, Carlson was unable to receive Netanyahu's blessing for the visit, with intermediaries telling him that the prime minister was not interested in responding to his overtures. Francis said she helped arrange for Huckabee to invite Carlson in place of Netanyahu, laying the foundation for the upcoming interview. I guess it has to be your invitation because it's not coming from the prime minister, she told the ambassador. And then we have this guy, Yoram Hazony. Now, we've talked about Hazony before. He's this very strange, I think quite a sinister character from Israel, who is this national conservatism figure. He organizes these huge national conservatism conference. He's the founder of the Edmund Burke Society. So, oh, well, Burke, conservative and so on. But he's a fervent advocate on behalf of Israel. He uses these national conservatism conference to advocate on behalf of Israel. So he says, "Oh, Israel
He's a
is
cutout. He's a cutout.
the paradigm of national conservatism, the nation state. This is the idea of the nation state." So he had in the past invited Tucker Carlson to speak, but now, as happens, Tucker Carlson is a persona non grata. So it seems like Tucker Carlson reached out to Hazony and wondered whether Hazony can arrange this meeting with Netanyahu. And as we can see from this lengthy tweet from Hazony, that the answer was no. And so a few weeks ago, a mutual friend asked me if I'd be willing to speak to Tucker Carlson off the record. Notice how he says mutual friend. They knew each other pretty well. I mean, he had spoken at previous national conservatism conferences. I agreed, and Tucker called me 3 weeks ago to talk. I continued texting with him for 8 days after that. But this past Friday, Tucker released a video in which he reported to the public on his off-the-record conversation with me. Inaccurately, of course. So here's some additional information on my short-lived discussion with Tucker Carlson about anti-Semitism on his show. And then Tucker called me Sunday, February the 1st. We talked for 1 hour and 23 minutes. So he obviously kept a very tight record of this.
Yep.
Here's what I noted on my desk calendar right after the call. 8 a.m., Tucker Carlson, 83-minute call wanting to know how to end the charges of anti-Semitism against him. Trump told him to end it on January the 11th. As you can see, Tucker explained that he was calling because he had come under pressure from President Trump at his famous meeting at the White House on January 11. He
Okay,
told
now we know why he was there. Okay, all right, go. There's a dots being connected here. All right, keep
That's right.
going.
That's right. Exactly. That's very important because it hasn't been clear, the dots exactly how this whole thing came about. He told me the administration wants him to find a way to stop his high-profile fights with Jews and Zionist Christians. Tucker told me that he wanted my advice on practical steps he could take to change the impression that he's an anti-Semite. I thought he was asking me to host him in Israel. So I explained to him that I can't do much to help him because just about every Jew I know believes he's been waging a savage campaign against Jews, Judaism, and Israel for the past 18 months. And
That's
that most,
ridiculous.
of course it is, and that most think his aim is to drive Jews and Zionist Christians out of the Trump coalition and out of the Republican Party.
That's not my interpretation. Is
No, it
that yours?
isn't my bad, but notice, I mean, essentially they're using Trump. I mean, he's a guy, is absolutely explicit. Their agenda is to use Trump. They mask their agenda by this whole national conservatism, which sounds fantastic. Oh yeah, yeah, you're a conservative. Well, yeah, sure. You're a nationalist. Yeah, absolutely. Well, then you must be a nationalist conservative, right? That's it. Down for that. That's what he does. That's Hazoni. But ultimately, what he cares about. Jews and Zionist Christians are being driven out of the Trump coalition and out of the Republican Party. I said that even a year ago, quite a few Jews would probably have jumped at the chance to appear on the Tucker Carlson show and to present an alternative point of view, but that this looked impossible to me now, and that it would stay that way as long as there's no change of direction on his part. Well, you see,
Well,
notice
what about the power of your ideas? Why don't you be
well,
interviewed? If
that's right.
you're
And so he's not,
convinced,
yeah, exactly. So he's
so
saying, well,
convinced.
he wouldn't appear on his show, and he's pretty much saying, no one I know will appear on your show, and that means I will urge everyone to refuse to appear on your show. That's his one, and that it would stay that way as long as there's no change of direction on his part. So, and then he goes on. Tucker wanted me to explain to him why anyone would think he was an anti-Semite. I answered that question for more than an hour, giving him a series of examples of statements he and his guests had made on his show that seemed completely unhinged and motivated by a desire to slander Jews, Judaism, and Zionist Christian in order to do as much harm as possible. He kept expressing amazement that anyone would think he was an anti-Semite.
I agree.
Yeah, but essentially, I mean, what this conversation was revealing, Hazoni wields a lot of money, and I'm not sure where he gets it, but look, it's a big deal to hold these big national conservatism conferences that invites just about everybody in the conservative movement. The next one's going to be in Israel. He's had them in America, wherever. So he wields money, he wields power. That's that's what he's all about. Um, and he kept expressing amazement. And I kept giving him examples of why I thought any fair observer would reach that conclusion if they were familiar with the relevant conversations he had hosted on his program. And the conversation ended with my agreeing to continue the discussion. I didn't feel he was open to dialing down the hostility towards Jews, Judaism, Israel, and Zionist Christians constantly being expressed on his program. But I know he knows all this hostility. Because he interviews people who basically don't get interviewed by somebody who was mainstream. I mean, that's really, I mean, yes, they get interviewed by, some of the people that we know, the gray zone and so on the electronic intifada. Yeah, absolutely. You get the other point of view. But Tucker Carlson is and has been for many years, a mainstream media figure. That's why, and he has a huge following. That's why it's a big deal when he allows people with a different point of view to come on his show.
Got fired for Fox for doing the same.
Exactly, and he had a huge. I mean, that's Fox News, which is the biggest of all the cable news channels, and he had the biggest show on that channel. But I also didn't want to close the door to the possibility that the pushback from the administration would eventually get him to make a change. So, pushback from the administration. Anyone who has been following Tucker's program in the weeks since January 11th knows that so far there hasn't been any such change.
Okay, well, the speech matter here?
No, no, it doesn't. On
Okay.
February the 3rd, Tucker wrote to me asking if he could speak at the first Israeli National Conservatism Conference, which is to be held in Jerusalem on June 8th to the 10th. I was taken aback that he would ask for something like that, given the content of our conversation 2 days earlier. But I did my best to draft a reply that would reinforce my previous description of what a great many Jews, Israelis, and Zionist Christians think of Tucker right now. Here's what I wrote in response to his request to speak at the first this National Conservatism Conference in Israel. So he's basically saying, no, you're not going to speak. And now he's sort of justifying as to why he's not going to allow him to speak. It says, Tucker, I appreciate the offer, but I need people to show up at this event. Realistically, Jews and Zionist Christians are not going to share a platform with you or come to hear you under the current circumstances. I'm just speaking descriptively about the situation. Much of the lineup will revolt if you join the program, and that story will blow back on you and other public figures, in addition to blowing up the conference. If you want to change the situation, there are things you can do unilaterally to shift the dynamic, and I think that's the way to move forward.
God, it's so insidious.
It really is. It really is. And then I thought Tucker had finally gotten the message that he should stop asking me for favors and instead consider how he could make unilateral changes that would help.
Very Israeli, isn't it?
That's right.
Very.
Yes, I make changes that would help people get past the impression that he is one of the leading Jew haters of our generation. Leading
Oh
Jew
God.
hater. This guy is supposed to be this intellectual, national conservatism, and I calls him one of the leading Jew haters of our generation. But then on February the 9th, you wrote to ask me if I would set up a meeting for him with Prime Minister Netanyahu. I'm not sure why he thought I was the right address for that request, but I knew very well that if someone were going to contact the Prime Minister's office with such a misguided idea, it wasn't going to be me. Here's what I wrote in reply to his request that I arrange a meeting for him with Bibi.
Well, this is really kind of forensically recorded,
Yeah,
isn't
yeah,
it?
yeah, yeah, exactly. It's like
Yeah,
he was
yeah.
it was all set, waiting to unleash this. I don't know how that could happen. It doesn't serve any interest I'm aware of. It could only damage him.
Do you think he recorded this conversation?
I'm sure he did.
Yeah.
It was a perfectly honest answer, and Tucker could have thanked me for giving him my honest assessment of the situation he has created. But Tucker wasn't happy with it, and
But that he has created, no, it's people like this guy that has created it.
that's right. But Tucker wasn't happy with it, and he typed an agitated little speech into his phone to indicate that our conversation had come to an end. And then on February the 20th, Tucker released a peevish summary of the contacts between us as part of a wild video in which he also suggested that Israel might be trying to kill him and his family. He didn't quite say that. He said that he wanted his security um, assured. And it was strange that nobody wanted to assure him his security. And looking at the way Hazoni is speaking here, if I were him, I'd also be a little nervous about coming to Israel. That's the story. I'll just add one comment. Most of what I do in public life is building coalitions. That means I talk to a lot of people who don't agree with me in all sorts of things, and sometimes that means meeting with people who don't like me very much.
Yeah, we don't get that impression from these uh,
Yes, that's right.
missives here. It
No,
looks like you don't want to talk to anyone that disagrees with you.
that's right. That's right. I have these in-person, off-the-record conversations because often people turn out to be quite different in private. Sometimes I've just misunderstood who they are from their public appearances. Sometimes I've understood very well who they are, but it turns out that they are willing to explore the possibility of making a change.
Compromise.
That's right. And also, even when nothing else comes of it, I learn a tremendous amount about people from these private
Oh,
conversations.
he's so reasonable. So
Right,
reason.
yes, very, very
Yeah,
reasonable.
so
And then he
reasonable.
goes on, in Tucker's case, the private person turns out to be exactly who we've been seeing in public. As of now, I'm not seeing any sign that he's willing to play ball with the mainstream nationalist camp in the Republican Party, much less that he has any regrets about who and what he has become since leaving Fox News in 2023. Who and what he has become.
Wow.
Whatever his motives for turning his podcast into what seems to be a circus of anti Jewish messaging, right now that project is clearly more important to him than helping the administration keep its coalition together so it can govern effectively and win elections in 2026 and
This
2028.
is just so fundamentally dishonest that my stomach is heaving. A circus of anti-Jewish messaging. He's talking about Israel, and you
That's
don't
right.
like that. That's all he's talking
That's
about
right.
is Israel.
Exactly. Exactly.
He's not
And that's
talking
and
about
that's the
Jews.
thing. His mastery of confounding these two completely different issues, Israel and the Jews, and talking about one and talking about the other, and therefore, if you want to call yourself a conservative, you have to support Israel, and otherwise, if you're not really supporting Israel, then you're a Jew hater. And if you're a Jew hater, then obviously you are hounded out of civilized society. And look, the only reason they want to win elections in 2026, 2028 is for Israel. What are you going to do for Israel? The whole idea that they're sitting there worrying about any of the kind of Republican conservative agenda for America, I'm not interested in any of that. What are you going to do for Israel? If and that's why you need to win these elections. So anyway, that was Hazoni, but it's clear from this um, from these missives is that there is now absolute powerful groupings to cut him out of everything, to essentially isolate him and cut him out. Try to make sure he doesn't get any guests on, and essentially to starve him into either into submission or starve him into irrelevance.
Yeah. So this recording of this very meticulous recording of, I am very reasonable. I'm trying to help him find his way. No, it reads completely the opposite. Is
Right.
that you had a nice restaurant here. It'd be a pity
Yeah,
if something happened. And this is a mafioso Don. That's
that's
what
right.
it is.
That's right.
And
That's right.
pure and simple.
That's right. And that's
You're
why,
threatening. You're
yeah,
threatening him. Do we know physically? We don't know that. It seems to be implied, though.
it's absolutely
But
implied.
certainly his livelihood and his presence in the public sphere, yeah, that's definitely a threat. That's in
Right.
black and white, everyone.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah, that's right. And the grim saying we want a change of direction from it. We need signs of a change of direction. Unilateral. You have to be you make these unilateral changes of direction. Um, well, I mean, for a talk show host, I mean, if you start, trying to ensure that nobody comes on his show, that has an effect. Now, he has, other people who will come on the show, but I think he wants to be central to the public debate. I don't think he wants to be a marginal figure. Yeah, of course he can have the guests on his show, but he wants to be
So
a
Tucker
figure.
is supposed to accept an external executive producer to his program.
That's it. That's it. I think that's the implication. Anyway, let's take a look at a little bit of his interview. As I say, it was 2.5 hours, so it was a very long, and we obviously can't go through that. Um, and here is firstly here's this. Let's watch little bit of this.
For kind of question, just for the record, but it did raise two questions I think are really important, and I hope you'll answer them. One is, where does that right come from?
I would think it comes from, essentially, you could say it comes from the Bible. I would say that it does. But it comes also from a long iteration of historical precedents going to the Balfour Declaration of 1917. It comes from the League of Nations 1927. It comes from the United Nations 1947,
right?
The Declaration of Independence of the Israel State, May of 1948. They were immediately attacked. They won the war. They were attacked again in 1956. They won the war. They were attacked again in 1967 by 5 countries. They won the war. They were attacked again in 1973 in the Yom Kippur War. They won the war. The point is,
now this is already a very strange reading of history. I think he's the first person that I've heard saying that they were attacked in 1956. In 1956, Israel, along with Great Britain and France, attacked Egypt. When was Israel attacked in 1957? 67, Israel was not attacked. Again, Israel attacked. But it's, it's kind of interesting. He just makes the history.
Yeah, but I mean, again, this is what is so perplexing and actually disgusting about this interview. Why is the American ambassador to Israel explaining Israeli history? I mean, what does he have to do with that?
That's a very good point.
And why is he put himself in a position to be the interpreter of a state narrative? Because George is absolutely right. What he just said is the usual nonsense that we've heard for decades. I mean, that's why I didn't even jump in and say
no.
no.
Yeah, exactly. It's always, but by what you've just said is very interesting, because the point about 1956 is that the U.S. administration of Eisenhower ordered Israel to withdraw from Sinai on penalty of sanctions. I mean, Eisenhower was ready to impose sanctions against Israel. So he's taking, essentially, and he does this throughout the interview, taking the side of Israel against his own country. I mean, this was an absolutely explicit instance when Israel was clearly defying the United States. Anyway, it goes on.
Does Israel have a right to exist? They also had wars in 1982 in Lebanon. They've had intifadas, 2 of those. They've had
Lebanon again in 06.
Okay, George, can you interrupt it? Pause for a second. Okay. I think Tucker did a really good job here. But having said that, Tucker is not an expert on this. Okay? He's informed. He asks intelligent questions, but he's not Max Blumenthal. He's not Norman Finkelstein. Okay? Not even a Glenn Greenwald. Okay? And that is not a criticism of Tucker. Okay? Tucker is well-intentioned, and he asks questions that everyone is ask about this, because it is a debate. This is not, none of this is settled. And so it's really important to point out that Tucker, being well informed, not being an expert, he's confronted with someone that does only talking points. The entire interview is talking points. And also, everyone, Huckabee never answered one question.
No, that's right.
Not one.
But you see, it's very interesting because, yes, obviously he's not an expert the way Blumenthal is, the way Finkelstein is. However, Huckabee would not have sat down with those people. I mean, Huckabee sat down with him because he was a former colleague of his at Fox News. I mean, they've known each other for many years. They worked together for many years at Fox News. So Huckabee sat down with him. He would never sit down with anyone like that.
Also, because I don't want to forget it, this is a Zionist deflection, and keep it in mind. Israel has the right to exist. This is one of the pillars of their propaganda.
Right.
Number one, anyone that says that to you, there's a very simple and easy retort, and a very honest one. But Israel does exist. Okay, so your point is vacuous. Okay, it exists it was created by the United Nations under international law. And when you become a member of the United Nations, at least presumably, you have certain protections, but you have certain obligations as well. Israel never takes the obligation seriously.
Right.
So
No.
Israel has the right to exist. Just say it does exist. Next point.
Well, what I say, but this is really where the argument, I think, it gets quite interesting. Though, of course, it's very hard to develop, and it wasn't really developing this concept. Well, do other countries have a right to exist? Does Romania have a right to exist? Does Latvia have a right to exist? You say, well, okay, well, they exist. Okay, so they exist. Well, what about peoples that don't have a state? Do they have a right to a state? I mean, there's a lot of people who can say, hey, this is obviously a distinct people with a distinct language and culture.
Yeah, the
They don't have
Kurds,
a state.
the Kurds, the
The Kurds,
Palestinians.
exactly. That's exactly, that's a very good example. Do they have a right to exist? I mean, what about, countries that, they find huge parts of their population live outside their borders? So that was those people, they don't have apparently the right to exist. They have to be a minority in somebody else's state. So we said, okay, well, Israel has that. But then he becomes quite a very telling, because he switches his argument all the time. Because one says, oh, well, we have all these United Nations resolutions, so on. As you said, yeah, those resolutions came with, well, conditional. Israel had to fulfill certain conditions, which Israel hasn't done. But then, he switches the argument then to say, well, this was God made this covenant with Abraham. Now that becomes a very different argument, and he kind of goes from one argument to the other as to, well, is it God made the covenant with Abraham, according to the Bible? Okay, what's the evidence that any of that has any historical basis to it? I mean, literally, I mean, there's just simply no historical evidence about this God making a covenant with Abraham.
Yeah, I mean,
But so he does. Oh, well, I'm a Christian. Okay, so you believe this, but why should anyone else believe it? Because they say, well, where's the evidence of even if that was a valid argument, that something that happened thousands of years ago has binding force today? What's the evidence for it?
yeah, this is the fusion of belief and contemporary, and I mean modern law. Okay, it's for me that's what you might do over a glass of wine or something, but they're very separate. They're separate conversations, and they shouldn't be
Right,
blended together. But
right.
that this is a Zionist talking point. They do it all of the
They they
time.
they do it all the time, and of course, and then of course you have the right to exist. Okay, in what territory? I mean, United Nations. You're going to talk about the United Nations. United Nations had the boundaries that were drawn up by the partition plan. You want to go back to the partition plan? That's all that the United Nations voted on. They never accepted the occupied territories as part of Israel. If you're going to invoke the United Nations, they never said that the West Bank and Gaza are part of Israeli territory. They drew up a partition plan. So if then okay, let's go back to the partition plan. He's not going to accept that. Then he says, oh, well, yeah, but Israel won all these wars and so on and deserve it. Okay, so Israel holds these territories until such a time that is defeated in war. Okay, well, that doesn't seem to have much way kind of a right to exist. Well, right to exist until it doesn't have a right to exist.
Well, did Tucker actually specifically, because what I remember watching it is they kind of were on the margins. But what is Israel's borders?
Well,
Okay,
he does bring that up, yeah.
okay.
He also,
They
and
know.
of
Did
course, he
he
never
ask
he
it as
never
a
answers that.
did he? But did he ask it as a specific question? I don't. I know
Yeah,
they
he
talked
asked
about
it. He did ask a specific, but Huckabee never really attempted to
it.
answer.
No, of course not. Of course not.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway,
Because Israel doesn't have any borders.
yeah, that's right. I mean, but if you're going to talk, I mean, if you bring up the United Nations, that's fine. The United Nations partition plan. If that's your basis in international law, then you have to go to the party. Oh, well, then oh yeah, but the Arab states attacked. Okay, then the Arab states attacked. But no one, in the United Nations has ever accepted the post 1967 occupied territories as Israel, and that Israel has annexed territory after territory since 1967. And so it's not a great idea to start invoking international law. But I mean, even assuming that the Balfour Declaration says what you claim it said.
Well, what is the Balfour Declaration? What is its legal standing, everyone? No, it doesn't.
It had a legal standing in the League of Nations, but there is no more League of Nations. So it's a. But in all the League of Nations had is there'll be a Jewish national home. Didn't say there was going to be a state of Israel. There was going to be a Jewish national home. You can argue about what Balfour meant by that, what the League of Nations meant by that, but nonetheless, it didn't say there was going to be a state of Israel.
Very familiar with the modern history of the state.
Okay.
Pretty familiar, I think.
But a Zionist simply means somebody who believes that Israel has a right to exist. Now, the question is, do you believe Israel has a right to exist?
Yes. I mean, I want Israel to exist. Well, no, but I want to know what that means. So, like, do other countries have a right to exist?
Well, they do exist.
Do they have a right to exist? You keep saying Israel has a right to exist, and I want to know what other countries
have a legal right, because every international body in the last 100 years has said the Jewish people have a right
I understand
to their indigenous homeland.
My question,
so that's a legal right.
What
do
other?
they have a biblical right? I would say that yes, but you may say they don't.
I don't know. I'm actually sincerely interested in finding out what you mean by a biblical right. But first, to the legal right, does any other country on the planet have the same right that Israel has to exist?
Well, you could say, does Jordan have a right to exist? When it was Transjordan and the Brits came and divided up the Middle East, and they gave some land to Jordanians, and they gave some land to the Saudis, and they gave some land to various Middle Eastern countries, and it was all carved up. And the French gave Lebanon its right to exist. Do they have a right to exist?
Do they?
Well, why not?
Okay. So that's my. So every country.
Does the U.S. have a right to exist?
I'm asking you.
Okay, and I'm telling you, I think the U.S. has a right to exist.
Okay.
We came here, but we came there. We're in Israel now talking. But does the U.S. have a right to exist? Does anyone question whether we have a right to exist?
I don't. Yeah, but I, of course, I'm for America. You know,
good for you.
But so every current country on the map has the same right to exist that Israel has. Is that what you're saying?
I think what we're saying is that when a country has established itself and it is following international law, it has been deemed by
this is
following international law.
It's right. He's done this again. He said this on international law. It's particularly later on in his interview he expresses his disdain for the United Nations. Well, I mean, if you know what is international law? Well, one measure of international law would be the UN Security Council resolutions. Israel has certainly not followed those. But he's saying international. But you see, the way he sort of switches the right to exist. Oh, Israel does exist. Oh, and Israel has asserted itself because it's won its wars. Okay, well, if that's going to be your measure, then presumably the moment somebody else defeats Israel, then Israel will no longer have a right to exist. I mean, and that's it. You would say, fine, well. Them's the breaks. You no longer have a right to exist.
Israel has the right to exist as long as it's aggressive against its neighbors.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know if you're going to show it here, but I mean, what Huckabee got himself into.
Right, exactly. We're going to come to
you got it. You got it. Okay, I don't want to spoil.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Numerous bodies that it is indigenous to its homeland, as Israel is. This is its homeland. It goes back 3,800 years to the time of Abraham. It's not that the Jewish people just showed up here in 1948 and said, we're going to have some land.
Hold on. So those are two different tracks, and I just want to make sure that we separate them so I understand each one separately.
All right.
So you're saying there's the modern legal framework, and so you said a country that abides by international law has a right to exist.
I would say that is a part.
Would the inverse be true that a country that does not abide by international law forfeits its right to exist?
Not necessarily if it has the capacity to stay and make its rights known. But there have been Jewish people in this land,
but that's
in this very land, for 3,800 years.
Okay, so But you're saying as the modern nation state with borders and a military and a Knesset and just all the kind of trappings of a modern country, all of which I support, that country has, every country on the planet has the same right as Israel to exist because it does exist. Is that what you're saying? I'm just trying to understand the concept here.
Well, I think what we're trying to get to is Christian Zionism, and you've taken this way off the road.
I don't know that I have. I don't
Yeah.
mean to. Christian Zionism is a separate thing, but I just keep hearing people say Zionism is the belief.
That's the fundamental argument that's going on. Does Israel have a right to live in their indigenous, ancient, historical land, a land that has been affirmed throughout international organizations, a land that has direct ties to the Jewish people?
I just want to know if this is a universal principle. I guess that's what I'm getting at, because if it's not, then it's meaningless to me. Because as a Christian, I believe in universal principles. Something is right for everyone, or it's wrong for everyone. We don't believe in special cases.
But here's the question. If the Jews didn't have this land, would the Jews have a right to any land?
I don't know. I'm not attacking the Jews. I'm asking if this applies to every people in every nation. Does every nation have the same right to its own homeland, to its own physical land that you say Israel does?
I feel like we're in a rabbit hole here.
No, I think it's a very straightforward question.
No, but
does that right extend to other countries other than Israel?
Yeah, he ran out of talking points. Yeah.
Right. That's right.
But it's obvious he ran out of gas. Okay.
Right. Right.
Because people like Huckabee, when they, I think you saw that. I don't know how dated it is, Palestinians, there are no Palestinians.
Right.
But Palestinians don't exist. But see, Mike Huckabee, his engagement it's always a punchline answer. It's not an extended conversation. He's well known for it.
Right.
There are no settlements. There are communities.
Right.
Okay,
No,
all in soundbite. But see, this going back to what I said earlier. This is what kind of makes this interesting, is because Huckabee is just a box of rocks, as far as I'm concerned. He has no any depth to him whatsoever. These talking points have been around a half century, if not longer. All of everything that he's just said. Okay, nothing new there. And Tucker is genuinely trying to understand. Okay, he's not a scholar of all of this, and that's why you see this really weird dance going on here.
It is very weird, and I think then the obvious question arises: well, why would Jews who have no connection with this land, why do they get priority to this land over the people who actually live there and do have a connection to this land? And that really gets to the heart of Israel, which is basically any Jew anywhere with no ties at all, to this land, can go and become a citizen there and acquire land should he want it. Whereas the people who were there, I mean, it wasn't an empty piece of land. There was no empty piece of land. There were people who were there, don't have right to this land.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if this is true. I've heard it many, many times, but I always want to be careful. From what I understand, and in the comments later, you can jump all over me, but from what I understand, you can't do a DNA test in Israel.
Yeah,
for the obvious reasons. Okay.
Right. No, sorry, and that comes up a little bit later, the business about the DNA test.
It's whether or not the people that are yelling in the streets from the river to the sea.
Oh, here we go.
That's a legitimate point of view to say that there should not be a Jewish homeland. There should not be a Jewish
You'll
state.
never hear me say that. I just want to
I know you haven't said it, but that's the argument.
It's one of the arguments going on globally. And the United States, excuse me, has a pretty narrow view, I would say, in our media culture, of what's happening around the world. There are plenty of countries having this debate. Stonehenge is a lot older.
All right, so then let's go and jump ahead a little bit.
And as you're doing that, George,
Hmm.
this whole mantra from the river to the sea. Okay, it could be the West Bank to the Mediterranean, or it can be the Euphrates to
Hmm.
the Nile. I again, supporters of Israel are trying to control even the controversy of from the river to the sea. What most people, in the way I look at it, at the pro-Palestinian camp, is that they want all people to be free. It's not saying it's exclusive to any one group. Now, there's many people that will interpret it, but the people that I follow, they want to, essentially what they're saying is that it's a one-state solution, which everyone has equal rights, okay? That would be freedom, okay?
Right.
But of course, Huckabee is going to get himself into enormous hot water with over this phrase. Keep going.
Right. Right.
Means only one thing, not the shrinking of Israel, but the annihilation of Israel.
I don't think
That's
I
different.
don't think you can say that you know what it means actually, because you don't know what's in people's hearts. So why don't we just deal with the facts? Maybe some people mean
I
it
know
to
it's in their
mean that,
mouths. I know it's in their minds.
but I'm not. Look, you'll never hear me say that.
Yeah.
What you will hear me say is I'm confused by what the definitions are. So let's go through this. You've appealed to Genesis. Genesis 15 says it's Abram. It's pre-Abraham. It's Abram receives from God the news that his descendants will inherit the land. And you tell me as the theologian if I'm getting this wrong, but from the Euphrates to the Nile. I think that's right. And that would include like basically the entire Middle East. That would be the Levant. So that would be Israel, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon. It would also be big parts of Saudi Arabia and Iraq. It would be, I mean,
I'm not sure it would go that far. I mean, it would be a big piece of land, but here's the
it
point.
would be a lot of places that are now countries that
But this particular area that we're talking
Good,
about,
he's going to step in it now.
Israel,
Hmm.
is a land that God gave through Abraham to a people that he chose. It was a people, a place, and a purpose. We can look at it that way. Christian Zionism, I want to go back because that's where we started.
I'm not going to let you off on this because you have
Go
said
ahead.
it 3 times
Okay.
that God gave this land
Yeah.
to this people. And so it is entirely fair for me with respect to ask, what land are you talking about? Because I just read Genesis 15, as I have many times.
Mhm.
And that land, I think it says, from the Nile to the Euphrates, which is, once again, basically the entire Middle East. So God gave that land to his people, the Jews, or he didn't. You're saying he did. What does that mean? Does Israel have the right to that land? Because you're appealing to Genesis.
Yeah.
You're saying that's the original deed.
It would be fine if they took it all, but I don't think that's what we're talking about.
Okay, so this was we'll come to that in a minute because when he said that, and I think yes, he kind of stepped in it, but I don't think he exactly said, oh, that Israel should have all of this land, and I think
No, he didn't. He didn't. No.
he was just sort of saying, well, okay, well, if they take it,
Yeah, but the
I
damage
mean,
is
the
done.
damage is done. I agree. I mean, there was, but
Oh God.
Tucker kind of provoked him, and then and he kind of stepped in it. So
Oh God. Yeah, no. Good. A moment of infamy.
yes,
Here today.
What would be fine? Well, it's exactly what we're talking about today.
But here's what I don't think
You think it would be fine if the state of Israel took over all
they don't
of
want to
Jordan?
take it over. They're not asking to take it over.
But you're saying that the reason that Israel is legitimate, has this inherent right to exist, is because, in part, because God gave it to his people. And I am going to the same Bible that you're referring to and noticing that that is a huge piece of land. So if God gave them that land, then they have a right to take it now by your definition, unless I'm missing something
Well, I think
completely.
you're missing something because they're not asking to go back to take all of that, but they
Why
are
not?
asking to at least take the land that they now occupy, they now live in, they now own legitimately.
They now occupy. Okay.
Safe haven for them.
Well, but may I ask though, as because you're explaining what Christian Zionism is and your theological beliefs. And you think you just said it would be fine with you if the state of Israel took all of Jordan, all of Syria, all of Lebanon.
That's really not exactly what I'm trying to say.
Is that what you said? I thought that's what you just said.
It was somewhat of a hyperbolic statement in that, if that's what you feel like that we're talking about, but it isn't. We're talking about this land that Israel the state of Israel now lives in and wants to have peace in. They're not trying to take over Jordan. They're not trying to take over Syria. They're not trying to take over Iraq or anywhere else. But they do want to protect
Lebanon?
Their people. No, they're not trying to take over Lebanon.
But you're saying that as a
Can you stop it, George, for a sec?
Zionist, you
Again, there's a lacking of expertise here. Taking over in controlling, you can controlling is the same as if you're there, okay? And we see these machinations all through the Middle East, okay? And so again, there's a lack of specificity when it comes to terminology here. Keep going.
Yeah, no, but I think what is saying, though, if you are going to make a biblical claim,
Yeah.
then there it is. That's your
Then
claim.
make the biblical claim.
agree with a lot of religious communities here in Israel that the justification for this country is theological. It's a contract between God and his people. And I'm telling you that that contract includes a tract of land that is much larger than the current nation state.
So you may be a bigger Zionist than even the Jews are that live in Israel.
I'm trying to understand the implications of your theology for geopolitics, because you're saying that the present government of Israel has a moral right to take over what are now other people's countries.
No, I didn't say that.
Then what are you saying?
I'm simply saying that the people who live in Israel, I think, have a right to have security, have safety. They have a right to be able to live in this land that they have a connection to for 30.
I told myself, and I said a prayer that I would not get annoyed, but as someone who is, the father of daughters, when I see child molesters hiding in Israel and escaping.
This is where I thought that Tucker kind of goes off the rails. Like, he does that several times in the interview, because he again brings up the whole Jeffrey Epstein thing, which really has nothing to do with Huckabee. I mean, why berate Huckabee about Epstein? But he also brings up this business of that various child molesters and sexual deviants have found a home in Israel, and that Israel doesn't extradite them. What has that got to do with Huckabee? I mean, Huckabee's the ambassador. That's up to the Justice Department of the U.S.
And it wasn't made particularly clear is that these are Israeli citizens that are going back to their country after being accused or allegations waged against. It looked like in the interview that this was kind of like a universal safe haven, which it's not. No, my only comment about that, George, is, and I would like to move into different parts of the interview. I don't want to focus so much time on this, but it only reinforces what I've been saying for the last month or so. This Epstein story is infecting everything.
Right.
And sometimes there's substance there, and then sometimes it's just background color.
Right. That's right. Exactly.
American justice, I think I have a right to safety in my country too. So you can understand that I think most people feel they have a right to safety. I do think Israel has a right to safety, and I hope that for them. And I'm sincere, but I'm an American, and I have a right to safety in my country too.
Of course you do.
Agree? And I think so, but I just want to get to this point. If Israel were to say, God gave us in Genesis 15 all of Lebanon, all of Syria, all the way up to Iraq, would that be legitimate in your view?
I don't think in this particular day and time they're asking for it.
Would it be legitimate?
It doesn't answer the question. It just refuses to answer that question.
Legitimate.
I'm not sure that it would be.
Why? Because you just said that.
Well,
God gave it to them.
I think that there is an understanding that the people of Israel today, now, if they end up getting attacked by all these places and they win that war and they take that land, then okay, that's a whole another discussion. But you and I started out. We started talking about something simple: Christian Zionism.
But it turns out it's
and
not.
Now
because I don't. The core of Christian Zionism, you said, and I'm quoting you, is the understanding, the belief, the theological understanding that Jews have a moral and legal. We went through the legal,
biblical.
moral deriving from the biblical.
Yeah.
The promises in our Bible, which we share with the Jewish people, the first part of the Old Testament, that it derives from God's promise to the Jews. And so I have two questions. What are the borders of that? And who are those people in 2026? And you're not the first person I've asked, but you're the most reasonable, most gentle, most theologically informed person. So I'm really hoping for an answer.
Yeah.
The first question was the borders. I can't get an answer.
Yeah.
Those borders are. So I'm going to give up. But the second question is every bit as pressing, which is who are the people? Who are the modern? Yes. Who are the descendants? So we know, and I believe, and I agree with you as a Christian, that God promised this land from modern day Iraq to modern day Egypt to this people, the Jews, to Abram's, actually not to Abram's descendants, as it says in Genesis 15. Who are his descendants now, and how do we know who they are?
I think they're the Jews, and we know who they are because they've always been a Jewish people. There has been an unbroken line of Jewish people, and they've lived in this land for 3,800 years. Sometimes not very many of them, because they were chased out all over the world. They were hunted down. They were almost annihilated during the Holocaust. They came back. To this day, Tucker, they represent, you know how many Jews there are in the whole world?
Please,
No, but
I understand. Look, first of all, the greatest genocide of Jews no one ever mentions was by the Romans, where they were literally banned from Jerusalem for 500 years.
Yeah, of course.
And it's all awful. And I'm opposed to all of that. I'm opposed to mass killing of anybody, period. I'm opposed to
hear you say that.
I mean it.
Yeah,
And I hope
I
we can
believe
agree
that.
on that.
I believe that.
My question is,
Why does Huckabee have to judge? He
Yes.
judges. He's judgy.
Yes, very, very much so. There's kind of there's a kind of condescending tone
Yeah.
when he said, "I believe you." In other words, no, I don't believe you.
answer, how do we know? Because what you're saying is that certain people have a title to a highly contested region. They own it in some deep sense. So I think it's fair to ask, who are they and how do we know? So the current prime minister's ancestors weren't from here within recorded history. He has no deed. Bibi Netanyahu, on one side, his family's from Poland. They're from Eastern Europe. So how do we know that he has a connection to the people who God promised the land to, Abram's descendants? How do we know that?
Well, if you take the genealogies that come not only from the Old but the New Testament, you see that there is a historical connection through the entirety of the Old and the New Testament.
Same thing with the Palestinians.
The Jewish connection.
Sorry.
Does that include Bibi's family? How do we know that if his family comes here? But how do we know it's the same people? No, why is that crazy? If you say to me,
if they speak the same language, if they worship the same God, if they follow the same Bible, if they follow the same cultures and traditions, and they always pray next year in Jerusalem, and they pray for the peace of Jerusalem, and they pray facing toward Jerusalem, does that not give you a little bit of a clue as to who they are?
Well, let's go through those things, because I would like to have a rational. This is a conversation I've wanted.
George, can you pause for a sec? Huckabee, Mike, buddy, the whole idea of Zionism is relatively new.
Okay.
You're being reductionist, absolutely reductionist in your thinking, okay? And the founders of Zionism were all atheists from Eastern Europe.
Right. Well, that's where it also gets a little bit problematic. If that's going to be your basis, but you know, as always happens, you know, they shift from one argument to another, which is, you know, well, is this a people, a race, or is this a religion? And then they bring in the language. It's a dead language. Nobody used this language. They kind of, you know, recreated this language. Nobody spoke it.
Let's just go through those things.
Okay.
So one of the things I admire most about Israel is they resurrected a dead language in 1948. Good for that.
Well, they really didn't resurrect it.
No.
It's existent.
Okay, I'm not. That's not. That's a compliment. I'm
Or
not.
press the issue, Tucker, because you're right.
Right.
Language has survived through this length of time. It's. I would call it. You might not, but I would call it a miracle. One of many.
Okay.
That you can attribute to this.
I think it's wonderful as someone who loves language. Netanyahu's parents did not speak Hebrew. Okay, they didn't live in this region. Netanyahu, the founders of this country, were mostly secular. Some of them were avowed atheists. They were not praying for the peace of Jerusalem. They weren't praying at all because they didn't believe in God. There's no technology linking their families to the people of this land 3,000 years ago. They're not. So how do we know, since they didn't share a language, they didn't share a religion, they had no religion whatsoever, how do we know that they had a right to come here from Eastern Europe and
But they were
take their land?
They were scattered to Eastern Europe. They were scattered all over the world. There were many in Ethiopia. They were in Russia. They were in Poland. They were throughout Asia. Jews were all over the place, but they were still Jews.
But did they actually want to
And-
come here? They didn't really want to come here. They wanted to go, they preferred being where they were, or wanted to go somewhere else. I mean, many ways they didn't have much choice, and they ended up here. So there's the idea that, we wanted to go back to this historic entity. Well, they really didn't.
They went to America.
They went to America, exactly. But anyway, I mean, I think we maybe next time we can talk about the rest of the interview, because there's he talks then about Iran, then he talks about how Israel is the most humane army that there has ever been, and compares it. And this is where it quite was striking. And they got into a kind of heated exchange that he compared Israeli army favorably to the U.S. Army. In other words, they are more humane and adhere to international humanitarian law more rigorously than the U.S. Army does. Naturally, Tucker took objection to that, particularly as you are the U.S. ambassador, so what are you doing advocating on behalf of another state?
When that was all being discussed, what unfortunate person came into my mind? Tammy Bruce.
Tammy Bruce. Yes, I was thinking about Tammy Bruce as well. What was it she said? Are you Jewish? No, but I wish I was.
Yeah. But see, there's so much in this to talk about. There's so much. But even a few minutes in, for me, is this was like another Douglas Murray attempt to, hit the ball out of the park, finally put this to rest, take down Tucker Carlson finally. Mike Huckabee embarrassed himself. And you know what? Even more so is that he's the American ambassador to Israel. And if he was just a private citizen and all that, well, that's all nice and fine. I mean, George and I vehemently disagree with Christian Zionism because I don't even think it exists. Okay, but that doesn't mean you can't believe in it. Okay, that's fine. That's your business. Okay, but the American ambassador to Israel parroting every single stale Israeli talking point, I felt really humiliated for humanity.
Right, that was the point, that he is supposed to be a representative of the U.S., and therefore he's supposed to be advancing U.S. interests in
Israel. Did you hear that at all?
That's what an ambassador does. It's U.S.
Did you hear any of that?
No, none of that. So he's advocating on behalf of Israel. And as you said, it is like Tammy Bruce, who's also employed by the State Department, and yet she spent her time advocating on behalf of Israel. And so that's what makes this whole thing rather troubling. Now, to be fair to him, he comes across as kind of a nice person. I mean, he seems a very, quite likable, unlike, I think, Tammy Bruce, unlike Douglas Murray. And so, he was a good sport about it. He got, to get into this argument. But basically, the arguments just don't add up at all. So
well, I mean, good old Tucker. Well, if the ploy was to try to mend fences and try to blur things a little bit, it didn't succeed.
It didn't succeed. No, that's right. But anyway, after this, of course, interview, there was the blowback, and particularly from the Arab and Islamic countries, and they issued a joint statement. by the Islamic and Arab countries and organizations condemning the remarks of the U.S. ambassador. Remember, there's a board of peace meeting which was inaugurated just a couple of days ago, and a number of these countries are all members of the board of peace. So they're not exactly thrilled by this statement by the U.S. ambassador. And so who's signing this statement? Jordan, Indonesia, Pakistan, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait, Oman, Bahrain, Lebanon, Syria, and the state of Palestine. And then we have the secretariats of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, League of Arab States, and the Gulf Cooperation Council expressed their strong condemnation and profound concern regarding the statements made by the U.S. ambassador to Israel, in which he indicated that it would be acceptable for Israel to exercise control over territories belonging to Arab states, including the occupied West Bank. And then they affirmed their country's categorical rejection of such dangerous and inflammatory remarks, which constitute a flagrant violation of the principles of international law and the Charter of the United Nations, and pose a grave threat to the security and stability of the region. And then the ministry stressed that these statements directly contradict the vision put forward by President Trump, as well as the comprehensive plan to end the Gaza conflict, which are based on containing escalation and creating a political horizon for a comprehensive settlement that ensures the Palestinian people have their own independent state. Well, it doesn't quite, the plan doesn't quite say that there's going to be an independent state. It says, down the road,
Yeah,
we can
maybe.
get a Palestinian self-determination. But either way, it has been adopted by the UN Security Council now. So that is, if we're going to talk about international law, that is international law. Certainly, it doesn't, recognize Israeli sovereignty over the West Bank or Gaza. That's absolutely not part of the plan. They underscore that the plan is grounded in promoting tolerance and peaceful coexistence, and that remarks seeking to legitimize control over the lands of others undermine these objectives, fuel tensions, and constitute incitement rather than advancing peace.
No lies detected.
That's right. The ministers reaffirmed that Israel has no sovereignty whatsoever over the occupied Palestinian territory or any other occupied Arab lands. They reiterated their firm rejection of any attempts to annex the West Bank or separate it from the Gaza Strip, their strong opposition to the expansion of settlement activities in the occupied Palestinian territory, and their categorical rejection of any threat to the sovereignty of Arab states. And then they further warned that the continuation of Israel's expansionist policies and unlawful measures will only inflame violence and conflict in the region and undermine the prospects for peace, and called for an end to these incendiary statements. The ministries underscored their country's steadfast commitment to the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people to self-determination and to the establishment of their independent state along the lines of 4th of June 1967 and the end of the occupation of all Arab lands. So they picked that date just before the start of the Six-Day War. All right, so I think, as you said, if the goal was to bring to an end this fighting among Republicans and conservatives on Israel, well, that hasn't happened. But that raises the next question, which is, well, what happens now to Tucker Carlson?
Yeah.
Will he now be essentially marginalized and driven out of respectable conservative society? And they certainly could do to him what they did to Pat Buchanan, and then you have to wonder. I mean, he has friends among big shot Republicans. I mean, including J.D. Vance, to whom he's obviously close. Will Vance essentially now disown Tucker?
Yep. That's what they used to call the $64,000
$4,000 question. Yeah.
Um, On the one hand, in the time of Buchanan, it was a different age and a different technology.
Right.
Okay. Um, I don't know how secure Tucker is on the internet. I mean, and the Ellisons and these, Bezos, is they control the servers.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, these are the people that can just make you disappear. Um, I don't know. I mean,
Okay.
I checked this morning. Tucker's got like 2.6 million views just for that interview. And just a 15 second review of the comments. Well, they were obvious, you know, mission failure, Huckabee. You failed, utterly failed in your mission. Okay. I didn't see one comment praising him, not one.
Right.
Okay.
But okay, but yes, there's no question he can have. I mean, unless Bezos and others simply cut him off, he can have a career and a quite lucrative career on the internet. Um, but I would imagine he would like to be an influential figure within Republican conservative circles. I mean, he used to attend these big events, Turning Point USA, uh, Republican convention. Will those things now be closed off to him? In other words, he'll be simply, marginalized from
Yeah,
any.
but I mean, but see, yeah, I think they're doing it, not attempting it. They are actually doing it, but that shows the who's in power, and this is going to be a blowback against them. Okay, we're the party of freedom of speech, except that's not going to fly. I mean, the divisions within the conservative movement have only gotten worse, not better, as a result of
Right,
this interview. Okay.
right.
How it's going to play out, I have no idea. Okay. But I don't see Tucker making any concessions.
I don't think he's going to make concessions, and that's why I actually think that probably his best bet is to make a run for the presidency himself. I'm not saying he's going to win, but that might be a way to assert himself into the conversation, because otherwise he's just going to be marginalized. Otherwise, they're just going to push him out and push him into the esoterica of the internet. He'll be,
I don't say this in a frivolous way. If he makes a run for the presidency, he will be deleted.
well, okay, but yes, I mean, like I said, but of course he does have, um, there's the example of Trump, what Trump did. Remember 2015, the idea of a Trump successful run was a
I
joke.
agree.
I mean, no one took it
That's
seriously. They thought
fair.
this, yeah.
Very fair. Very fair.
But he somehow pulled it off. He does have some resources. He does seem to have money. I don't think he doesn't have the money that Trump had, but he would be able to raise money. I think small contributors, um, and I think he will have a distinctive voice, distinctive
George,
agenda.
it's one of these things. I mean, money, there's too much money in politics, okay?
Right.
Way too much money. But Tucker's in this very unique category, his name recognition. You don't need money if you have name recognition,
Right.
meaning he doesn't need all the bundlers, all these
Yeah.
others, because he's already paid. It's already baked in. He's already there.
That's right.
So
That's right. And
I it, you and I have talked about this.
we've talked about it before. Yeah.
Okay, today's Sunday. I have an opinion. Tomorrow is Monday. I might have a different opinion. Okay,
Right.
it's a tough one. It's really tough.
It is. But I think that that's probably the way to go, because otherwise, I think he will just simply be pushed out and really have no role at all. I mean, he now has to assert himself as a major intellectual figure on the right. He has to then show that, because if you don't, then you're kind of like Marjorie Taylor Greene. She's going to fade out. I mean, I think it's just, if you don't have a platform, you disappear. She's going to disappear, and I think that's why if he runs, J.D. Vance, who would be the natural heir apparent, he's now compromised. He, compromised one thing after another. Hey, you said it was going to be America first. You said that no more forever wars, no more of these interventions. We'll be attending to domestic issues. You haven't done that, and there's going to be a problem for him. So therefore, Tucker
I've
is the
already
natural heir to the Trumpian message.
I've already crossed them off.
Right.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's
And
it. So
I'm one of the very few that actually praised J.D. Vance a lot
yeah.
before he went into politics, before he ran for Senate.
Good.
And well, as is the modern condition, I am disappointed again.
Right.
Okay.
Right. No, that's right. So there clearly then, and we've talked about this before, that America First, nationalist, patriotic, right-wing populist mantle, someone has to take it. And Trump is obviously disappointed, and by implication, therefore, J.D. Vance is disappointed. Who else is there? Because the other candidates who we think of like Cruz and Rubio, they're gonna push they're gonna go back to the familiar Bush, Cheney,
Well, I mean that, but,
mainstream Republicanism.
yeah, I mean, not to belabor the point, and I think it would be a very good separate video, but I want to kind of end on this note, very depressing note, actually. Um, Trump didn't invade Venezuela. Trump, there's no regime change there. An indicted criminal was just removed. Okay, and well, we can, of course, let Iran have a bomb. Okay, um, at this point, I thought I am the opinion that America First, anti-interventionist, anti-war, they've really caved, kind of easily. It's just
Well,
kind of
that's right. But
poof.
that's what you just said. That's going to be an argument for the Trumpian approach. In other words, if they
Mhm.
do that, the Venezuela, hey, there's no regime change. We just removed, the figurehead, but in every other way, we succeeded. If they inaugurate a transition in Cuba, a kind of move away from communism. There's no violence. There's no war. Yeah, that's going to be positive. But of course, then you have Iran. Now, that's the the big enchilada. You're going to say what's going to, because if he does engage there into a military confrontation, and that is likely to lead to a disaster. It's hard to see how it doesn't at the moment, unless there's things that we don't know. Then that is going to be absolutely a negative, destructive part of this, and Trump would not be able to recover from that. So I think everything depends on what happens with Iran.
Yeah, I mean, I think you and I said this from, again, even before the 12-day war, is that this has the makings of making or breaking this
I
presidency.
think so.
And the oddity of it all is that he didn't run on Iran.
No, he did
Okay.
not. No, no, he did not.
And so again, we've spent endless hours of
Yeah,
discussing how he boxed himself in. I mean, I don't know. Maybe this is too conventional in thinking, but he's assembled a lot of
yeah.
assets there. How do you say, well, never mind?
No,
How do
I
you,
think. I mean, I think it can be done.
oh
And
yeah, anything can be done.
exactly. I mean,
Okay.
everyone will breathe a sigh of relief, and yeah, and there'll be people who don't like Trump will be gleeful and make fun of him and so on. But that's you're not going to lose any points there. According to the polls, people will be relieved. Thank God we've avoided a war. I mean, it's going to be a positive for him. It doesn't matter that the New York Times is going to be gloating, or AOC will be gloating, and Chuck Schumer will be gloating. It's going to be a
Go ahead
positive for
and
him.
gloat.
Both, exactly. Yeah, it's a positive. He's walked away. There's not going to be a war. So I don't think that's going to hurt him. That doesn't mean that he will walk away, but there's absolutely an easy opportunity for him to do that.
Just like you, George. I mean, we tend to listen and watch to the same kind of group of people. I don't think anybody really knows.
No, I don't think so.
I'm not going to go through the names or anything, but I mean, there's certainly no consensus. That's for sure.
Exactly.
And I pride myself in not involved, getting engaged in military talk because I'm not a military person. Okay, but even among the military people, it depends. Like, yeah, set up the scenario, and I'll tell you what I think. Okay, that's how it's almost how everybody's approaching it. Well, if this is the case and this is the case, then yes. Or if this, then no.
Right. No, I think that's right. Because in a way, this whole thing has come up as a surprise. It seemed to come out of nowhere. We were under the impression that the whole thing was over. Trump was done. He touted that this was a fantastic success and kept going on about a wonderful military, our B-2s, phew, destroyed everything,
Obliterated,
pulverized.
obliterated,
Exactly,
obliterated.
obliterated. And those pilots, what a marvelous job they did. I thought, okay, well, that's it. It's over. And then suddenly this came out of nowhere. We're going to do this again without any explanation. And that's which part of his makes this whole thing so puzzling that there's no explanation for it. Oh, no nuclear weapons. But I thought we've already dealt with that. It was not the whole point of the 12-day war. So that's why this what he's doing, no one can quite explain what he's going to do or really why
Well,
he's doing whatever he's doing.
okay, we know the history of arms control, naval agreements at the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century. These were great powers that were very aware that if the arms buildup continues, it creates the possibility of escalation and an accident or misunderstanding and all of that. That's how great powers worked. Okay. It didn't always succeed. And of course, in the case of the First and Second World War, it didn't succeed. Okay. But this what makes this so anomalous is that the United States and Iran do not have any intrinsic
No,
conflict.
no, that's
There's
right.
no intrinsic
No,
conflict.
that's exactly right.
It's like, is America worried about Iranian missiles?
Yeah.
No.
There's not,
And the reverse, do you think the Iranians think, oh, the Americans are going to hit us because we have our missiles? No, the Americans don't care about
no,
that.
no,
It makes
absolutely not.
this so opaque to
Right.
common sense.
That,
You
that,
said,
that,
why is this third country involved?
right. No, that's right. And that's why whenever anyone tries to explain, they kind of go back to something that happened in 1979, 1982, 1983, where you can't shape policy, particularly war and peace, about things that happened more than 40 years ago. And this is what they're saying. Oh well, 1980, the Beirut bombings. Well, first of all, you'd have to actually establish Iran was behind that. Then the next part of it would be, well, why did they do it? The Beirut bombings. Well, probably it wasn't a great idea to get yourself into the middle of that civil war
Civil War.
in Lebanon. And and the third point is, well, what was the lesson that Ronald Reagan took from it? You're always invoking Ronald Reagan, Ronald Reagan. He said, hey, we got to get out of here. There's no interest here for us. We're losing lives. And what the hell are we doing here anyway? And that's
And you know
that
what,
Reagan
George?
took.
And if you look at the corpus of I would say the imagined legacy of Ronald Reagan, because a great deal of what his legacy is imagined, and that legacy changes through time. The withdrawal from Beirut is not a stain on, it's not a blemish on his legacy. It's not.
No, exactly.
It's not at all.
Not at all. But I remember at the time,
I
people
do too.
condemn it. People condemned it. Oh, for the same in the same terms. Reagan chickened out. Reagan's yellow. Oh, it was really. I mean, I know he's been sort of sanctified. He's canonized. What a figure. But I remember at the time people thought this was really disgusting. Really, what a cowardly thing to do. But he took the right approach, and he won overwhelmingly the following year in 1984. No one said we should still be in Lebanon. I'm not going to vote for Reagan because
That's
we should still be in
exactly my
Lebanon.
point.
Yeah,
It's part
right.
it's part of the DNA of the body politic. It's always there, but it very rarely is there someone that will take the mantle.
Right.
Americans don't like these wars. They don't like them at all, okay? As it goes up the power structure, their voice disappears, okay? It's always then you have someone like Donald Trump saying the Iraq war was a stupid war,
Right.
okay?
Right.
Okay, and people agreed, yeah, it was, particularly the guys that fought there and came home.
Right.
All right.
Exactly. Exactly.
So Donald Trump, if you're watching, back down,
I, I
back
think so.
down.
I think so. Absolutely. Absolutely. There's
Okay.
plenty of opportunities. And it doesn't matter if Levin calls you a coward or
Right.
Taco. Who cares? No, Levin. He has no following, zero following. You know,
He's manufactured. He's completely manufactured.
exactly. So don't worry about that. Walk away. Everyone's going to be happy. People will be alive. No one's going to get killed. So
And
yeah,
who will endorse you, Donald Trump? Tucker Carlson. Full circle, everybody. Full circle.
exactly.
All right. All right. As you can all tell, I'm recovering from a cold, but speaking with George, I find to be very it's medicinal. Okay, it kind of gets my blood up, and that's what you
Right.
need when you want to
Right.
recover. All right, this is a goggle with Peter and George. We're on locals. This was our Sunday. Well, it ended up being quite long,
Yeah,
actually.
Tucker Long, yeah.
Unfortunately, everyone, I have a medical appointment tomorrow that I can't break, so I won't be able to do the live stream. It's not because of technical reasons, it's just because. An appointment was made for me and I can't get out of it. Everything's fine. It just tests. Okay. George and I will reconvene on Wednesday.
Wednesday, exactly. And then the dogs make their appearance. They say, "Yeah, we also have an appointment. It's known as an appointment with the tip jar, and somebody's breaking these appointments, and the dogs aren't happy when appointments are broken. So if you want to, put the dogs on an happier footing, please, whatever you've got, anything that you're not using, into the tip jar. $100 bills, gold coins, crypto, whatever you're not using. We're very grateful for all of your help, friendship, and support. The more you're able to donate, the more of these videos we can make, the more we can improve on the technology, and above all, maybe we'll get an appointment with the dogs one of these days. So that'll be something. So remember, if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye bye.